Yep. Open the meeting.
To the chair. Whakataka, te hau ki te uru. Whakataka, te hau ki te tonga. Kia mā kina ki uta. Kia mā taratara ki tai. E aki ana te atakura. He tio, he huka. He hauhu, ti hei, mauri ora.
Mauri ora. Can I thank the councillor for showing okay?
And I'd endorse that too. I'll second that. Okay, welcome. This is our meeting for March, and it's pleasing to see that we are in a environment where more people can turn up and be in person. I'm sure I speak for most of you that I'm completely over Zooms and Teams meetings, and face-to-face is much better. So do we have any apologies, please?
Is there an apology from Mike Paku?
Apology for Mike Paku. Would someone like to move that Mike Paku's apology be accepted? Van Bake, Ormsby, all those in favour will say aye, contrary no. Aye. Notices, I've just got to give you notice that in the event of an earthquake, you're to drop, cover and hold. If the shaking is long and strong, then when the shaking stops, you get out the door through the nearest exit and proceed towards Napier Hill. The best way is along Dalton Street to Tiffin Park and up Cameron Road. If an emergency alarm sounds, then you should immediately evacuate the building through the nearest exit. The assembly area is in the grass out on that corner there. We've been there before. Emergency exits clearly signed. And the council chamber is currently a designated public space and spacing is required. And finally, this meeting is being live streamed on Facebook and recorded for viewing at a later date. So be careful what you say. It will be recorded and used, taken as evidence down against you some later date. Okay, there's housekeeping. Now, next item is conflicts of interest. Does any councillor have any conflicts of interest they wish to declare in regards to today's meeting or subsequent meetings? There is none. I now move on to the confirmation of the 30 March minutes 2022. These have been circulated. I presume if people have got some issues with them, they'll raise them with the minutes secretary. If not being the case, would somebody like to move the minutes?
Happy to.
You're Van Bake. Who would like to second?
Happy to.
Councillor Williams. For the motion, all those in favour say aye. Carried.
Aye.
Contrary say no. Carried. We now move on to the next item, is the follow-ups from the previous meeting. Chief Executive, would you like to lead us through this, please?
Chair, there's only one item has been responded to, and otherwise we can take any questions in relation to that or the Lagoimas that have been lodged during the previous month.
Okay. Any questions on Lagoimas follow-ups? Being none, we'll move on to the significant organisational activities. Back to you, James.
Thank you, Chair. So the overarching comment I would make is that the Council's work has been disrupted in the last month across a range of teams as a result of the significant rainfall events that have occurred in Central Hawke's Bay and the northern part of the region, times two. And there has been some diversion of activity to support the community, particularly in the Wairoa district, which is having some flow-on consequences. But other than that, the Council's work program remains broadly on track. And we have members of the leadership team here today who can answer any questions in relation to either the significant activities report or the strategic projects register as well.
Okay, well, I'll go around the room from my right to left, and if people identify which part they're in, so we can go to that. And I'll start with you, Councillor Ormsby.
Yeah, I'm happy to pass, thanks, Chair.
Pass. Councillor
Pass
Taylor.
too, thank you,
Pass. Councillor Foss.
Just a quick one. It's kind of a general one, though. It's, to the CEO, has there been any improvements or increase in the pollution monitoring or of rubbish monitoring of the urban streams, particularly the Karamood catchment area, from our environment and our science team?
I would need to come back to council with some information on that. So we'll take that as a action for the next meeting.
Thanks.
Councillor Van Beek.
Yeah, just two. Number 17, 21st of May, this is the meeting planned for the sharing community for setting up a catchment group. It's 21st of May, that's on a Saturday. Is that the usual timing that we meet with communities?
So typically, I think particularly for rural communities, weekend meetings are preferred to
Okay.
enable them to participate around their work commitments.
Okay. And then point 18, that was postponed due to COVID disruption in rural areas. The winter grazing and reticulation stock water workshop in Tatura has been planned for May. I don't see a date. Is there a date?
We'll come back to you on that.
Great, thank you. Thank you,
Councillor
Mr.
Foley.
Chair.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Just point 4, Wairoa flood event. Presumably our staff have been out and about and talking to landowners, attending meetings. You know, from a regional council point of view, are we doing as much as we can to support the landowners up there affected, and is there extra things we could be doing, or is there things we've pulled back from as a result?
So I guess it's two. So there's a twofold answer to that. One from an asset management perspective in terms of our schemes, and the other from an integrated catchment management perspective in terms of its impact on the land. So I know Ian's team have been doing a lot of work following up with landowners up in the Wairoa area, and is partnering with GNS and Gisborne District Council to fly the area to gather some intelligence on the impact to the landscape. In terms of the schemes, we've flown all the schemes in a helicopter to do condition assessments, and we're following up a raft of questions and queries from people within the schemes and on our notification communication lists. So look, we've got a pretty long list of things to work through, but we're working through that day by day.
Chair, perhaps I could just add, in the absence of Mr Maxwell, who is on leave this week, that at the ENICC committee we get an update on the work, particularly in the Wairoa district, that's being done by the catchment delivery teams working alongside landowners that have been affected. I think that would be useful for
Yes, please.
committee to.
Good suggestion.
On that.
Thank you. Points 22, 23. The flood events moved around a lot of gravel, so new surveys need to be done around quantities. Is that it? How long will that process take? And point 23, the Chilean needle grass exemption. What's the size or length of river area that involves?
Yep, so to start with that, look, there has been significant gravel movement within the rivers, so it does need to be resurveyed, and that has a timescale of months. Surveyors are all very busy with a whole raft of projects around Hawke's Bay, and we'll schedule that in. In terms of our IRG projects, we're trying to make some good judgment calls based on our previous data and I guess experience look over the rivers to make sure there's no undue delays in that process. But certainly we do have a raft of surveying to do. What the final question, sorry?
Chilean needle.
Oh, Chilean needlegrass. So look, I'll get a map for that. I think it's a 2 kilometre shift off the top of my head, but we'll get a map and provide that so there's some clarity on the old and new areas. It certainly doesn't remove the full Chilean needlegrass area, but it does move down from the confluence significantly.
All right, so I'd like to know what the implications of that are. So when you're moving them, so you change that, so what are the implications of what does it mean?
So if we make that as a follow-up,
Yep,
happy
that's
to
great.
email
Thank
that
you.
out. Yep.
Will? Michelle McElroy, any follow-up questions you'd like to ask?
Oh, I was too busy concentrating on something else. Aroha mai.
Just on the Organisational activities. You got any questions?
Oh, okay. Well, I'll put a follow on from Will, and I can't remember what number it is because I'm looking at another part. With Ruakaturi. So Charlie and I went up to a hui with Minister Whaitiri up to meet with the whānau up there in the valley area. You don't know until you've been there, and just whole maunga are gone, whole hillsides are gone. I've never seen it in my life. I'm used to seeing the scarring from erosion, but not whole faces. It was quite shocking, Charlie? And just hearing from the other whānau too is the impact on that extra driving. We went on the road that night. It's quite a hike, Charlie, about nearly 2 hours on a metal road. And a lot of them stay at home because it's 2-hour trek just to go to town. So and they're really feeling it, our community out there, especially with the bridge down. But I know that the council and Wakakotahi are working on that. But yes, thank you, Will, for asking how our farmers were. And I know not long after Minister Whaitiri there, I think it was a couple of days later, Minister Allen turned up as well. So the community have been engaged quite a bit.
When we have the EICC meeting in Wairoa, there's going to be a full updated report, so we can come back to that again there.
Awesome.
Charlie?
Yeah, just in keeping with the Wairoa flooding event, Michelle's right, the Ruakaturi was really hit really hard, and in fact the Te Ranga Bridge is out, unusable, and so the whole community is either stay home or use the back route around through Hawke. And as Michelle said, good 2 hours for a safe driver. Rally drivers will probably love it, but they'll come off. So is any news yet on what the community asks is when as soon as we can get foot traffic across there, so they can just ferry their kids up to there, they can then walk across the bridge, then get onto the college bus and go to school and other school buses and things. Any idea on bridge time?
6 weeks.
Well, that's more the Wairoa District Council's responsibility than ours.
Yeah, I imagine it is, but I thought we might have taken a purview of it when we went and flew over everywhere.
The latest update I've received is 6 weeks for the establishment of a walk bridge across next to the Te Ranga Marae Bridge. So that was 2 days ago.
Yeah, I know yep. But it's the bridge itself, yeah.
Oh, unknown.
Cool, okay. Probably the second point is that just going back to the Genesis one, that there was a bit of a talk about whether they had actually released their floodgates at the time of the flood, or did they do it after?
Oh yeah, the lake.
So we couldn't answer that, I don't think, here and now, but we're happy to look into that.
That Waikarapawana.
Yes, no, the floodgates. They have
No,
floods
but
there,
that's the...
yes,
I can't
yeah,
understand.
the Waikari Taheki, because it comes around the corner and obviously hits all those corners, especially if it's in full flight mode. Yep.
All right, we'll find out about that. Councillor Kirk, your question?
Thanks, Mr Chair. If I can go to the catchment report and item 26 and 27, Coastal Bird Survey, and a note, the Facebook live event, 6 to 7 p.m. Tuesday the 10th of May, and I'm aware that councillors will be partaking in the fine hospitality of the Wairoa District Council that evening, and wonder whether we could look at an alternative or an additional event so that we could partake in also the outcome of the bird survey. And second question, will that be part of the Environment Committee report?
I had thought that the survey had already been presented to the ICC committee, but it may have been that it was a
Been on the agenda.
different survey.
Different survey, and this one has not.
So we'll follow that up.
Thank
Yep,
you.
that's and I think going to the NICC committee is probably the
The point that Neil's made, and a very good point, is that we're all scheduled to be in Wairoa that night, and we're supposed to be doing some work with the locals. It'll be bad form if we're all sitting in the corner on our cell phones looking at the Facebook feed to keep up to date with us. So can we have an alternative viewing time? I presume the answer is yes, and then what is it going to be?
That's right.
Well, you'll be able to watch it, of course, anytime after the
Yeah.
event. You just won't watch it live because it will be recorded. So,
What's
but-
wrong with the preview?
Well, it's,
Hadn't been
it's
recorded
live. That's the.
Moving on right along, Mr Chair, I'm sure we'll find a solution.
Okay, yes, I'm sure.
Can we move on to item 13 in the strategic projects? We've got flood control and drainage scheme 3 scheduled, Hiratonga,
Yep.
Tuki, etc., Wairua. My first question is, could we have a division of the Hiratonga scheme to include the Napier drainage system, stormwater and drainage system, so that we've got some line of sight on progress as a sub project, if you like. Is that possible?
So 13 is specifically on the IRG funded projects, which are defined with the Crown and don't include upgrades to the Napier Miani scheme.
Is there a link, though, between the IRG and general delivery on the schemes?
We have a dedicated delivery team, so we can think of how we can provide that further visibility, but in terms of that item, it is specifically on the defined 4 IRG projects.
So I guess the answer then is, could we have a separate number and a separate report for visibility on the Napier flood scheme?
So can I suggest that we give some thought to how we give visibility rather than just add in here, because
Sure.
this is a register of our big strategic projects. There's a lot of operational activity of which this is largely business as usual that doesn't get reported in this format. And I just wouldn't want to start adding in an ad hoc manner a range of more business as usual activity to this register, otherwise we'll lose the purpose of it, if you like.
Good, we can't have ad hocery.
Yep, so
let's-
perhaps a
let's get back to
suggestion
Another suggestion, I'm happy with that.
is we create an item in the tabular format.
Okay.
Right, the next question, and again, in light of that last answer, I'm not sure how to fit it, but in
Start
our
with the question, Warren.
our long-term plan, Mr Chair, we've got undertakings to do annual audits, if you like, of the river assets, and full audits every 12 years. Is there a report, or where do we see that those audits have been undertaken for all our river systems?
So these are of the ecological management plans on a 6-yearly basis.
Undertake river surveys, is that what?
So we undertake surveys of the river on a 3-year cycle.
Yes.
And then ad hoc. So after the recent flooding, for example, we were just discussing the need for an additional survey.
Sure. I note in the long-term plan that the audit river assets annually by a chartered professional engineer and full assessment every 12 years. Is that a different report?
So that's asset inspections, and so we have an asset register which tracks whether those inspections have occurred or not.
Sure.
And sometimes that's something the auditor looks at as part of their audit of the LTP.
And where is that reported? How do councillors get a line of sight on that?
So that would have to be an ad hoc, a new report created for councillors to see that, because that's just operational work that we do every day. It's contained within a register, and so we need to create a report for councillors. So we'd have a look at the nature of the report, the frequency of the report. Is it the request for one-off ad hoc report? Is it part of a regular reporting program? We're keen to understand.
I think to answer your question, we had a conversation about this previously, and I thought we were looking at having a planning session in which these things would be reported to councillors in a sort of a holistic way, so we could all get some side of it, not necessarily as a report to hear, but have a planning session to do that. So would that be workable?
So for instance, in the number of workshops we went through in the creation of the last LTP, we went through a lot of these matters.
Yeah.
If it's more of an assurance report, which it sounds a bit like,
Yes.
we can consider the best way to do that.
That says,
Well, for further consideration, I think.
Okay, well, let's have an assurance report, workshop it. If we need something better than that, we'll do it. All right. Okay, any other questions, councillor?
No, it's fine, thanks.
Councillor Williams?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have two or three, I'm afraid. But the first is the Bayview Whirinaki Cycleway. Just really an understanding, ensuring that my fellow councillors understand also what's at stake here, and to get clarified, perhaps Mr. Dolly could suggested that the project's cancelled because of the land acquisition issues. My understanding is that the implications of that are that that cycleway would lose great ride status, and $500,000 of MB funding would go west or south, perhaps more accurately, and 200,000 of our funding would revert to us. Am I correct? What's the next plan B in that regard?
So you are correct. That project attracted MB funding under a great ride status that has certain attributes that it needs to meet. So effectively we have lost that funding, and it was co-funded by the Hawke's Bay Regional Council as well, so we would not be obviously spending money on that activity. And there's options being looked at which aren't a great ride, which is more of a commuter type ride.
Okay. All right, so every cloud has a silver lining, I suppose. Just in terms of right tree, right place, and I want to make a comment on this paper when it's moved, if I might. Can you just, it says themes have been raised by farmers in terms of their discussions. What are some of the themes that farmers are raising?
I don't think there's anyone here who could answer that question for you in Mr. Maxwell's absence. I'm sorry, councillor, but we can provide you with the answers to that in due course.
All right, could I just perhaps as that have a follow-up also on how many pilot farms are in the bank at the moment or in the bag, and what just a reminder of timelines for next steps on that project.
Sure.
The next, maybe the last, under farm environmental plans, there is the comment that there are still 160 FEMPs to be received. This is item number, this is project 9 under the project table. And 160 FMPs to be received from from providers, plus another 25 properties with capital C compliance. What does that mean? Does that mean compliance issues, or what does the compliance word there mean? I don't know.
So what it means with compliance in the first instance, they will be followed up directly, and then on a cascade of interventions.
So that was in the compliance means enforcement.
Correct.
Okay, so that was the enforcement team. All right.
Correct. That is correct.
And finally, partial pest plan review, project 12. The BWP has appointed an independent expert to run through the process and hear submissions. That's not in place, I assume, of the working party, but alongside. Is that right? It'll be the working party that hears the submissions. Or am I wrong? Yes, I got that from the governance.
Yep.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Those are my questions.
Apiata? I've got two, but not on the paper. I'm being out of step here. I get that, but I'm happy to be corrected by the Chief Executive after it's done. Firstly is on SkyTem. I'd like us to have an update on where we're up to with SkyTem and when we can start to see some of the reports and the programs for that. It's slipped a little bit. I'm really interested. And the second thing is I'd like a report from our preeminent deer stalker in the HBRC on deer control. We had some letters from concerned people about deer. I know that deer control is not the primary responsibility of the council, it's DOC, but there is a problem about deer, and we're going to get a report on what is being done, what can be done about deer and the problem of feral deer.
It's on the
You're right, it's on the EICC.
Is it? Oh, good. Exciting. Okay, Councillor Williams, you wanted to speak, so I presume you'd like to move the report?
If I move the paper, that might be, can I move the paper be received?
Yes, so second. Councillor Bake. So,
very briefly, thank you, Mr. Chair. I think my questions on right tree, right place. I think that the recent storm really just underpins the urgency and I guess cogency of that project. And I would have thought, I guess highlights our vulnerability to those types of events from what we're hearing from Michelle, and no doubt will be revealed through the survey. I'm just wondering in my head whether this isn't something we don't absolutely give priority. We've got red dots all over regional water security for reasons that are complicated and complex. This is a project stream that we are better able to control with the goodwill of the landowners, and I'm just wondering, for what it may be worth, is there a case for fast pedalling on this place project to the absolute utmost of our abilities? I would mention also that I attended the LGNZ regional hui, or at least part of it, and there's quite a lot of negativity coming around the whole forestry dialogue. Forestry is being portrayed as a dirty word, in effect, in a lot of rural communities, and I just cautioned everyone to think about what that means for reclothing the landscape, and that not all forestry is bad, and that farm forestry can be good. It can be good for the environment, it can be good economically. So it's a question of dialogue. Those are the points I wanted to make, Mr. Chair, for whatever they are worth.
Any other speakers? Councillor Curtin.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Chair. And following directly on Councillor Williams' observation, he's absolutely correct that there is this urgency around protecting our landscape, but there's also urgency, I would suggest, and another good reason to take urgency, and that is the level of risk to communities as a result of increased flooding issues. And that's why I raised the issue earlier in inquiring about our reporting thereof. And I have some confusion, if you like, around the reports per se, because they drift somewhat into areas of, if you like, operational issues as opposed to specific project issues. A number of the items in the paper straddle both, and I would suggest we need clarity around, particularly around our flood resilience, so that we, even if it is outside a specific project, we need line of sight on what those, particularly the capital expenditures on those items are. So I agree with Councillor Williams that we need to have focus on the consequences of climate change and the effects on our land and our communities.
Thank you. I'll put the question. All those in favour of receiving the report, say aye. Aye. Contrary, no. Carried. Call for minor items not on the agenda.
Gisborne Rail.
Gisborne Rail. Okay.
Yep, Chair. That's for Manu and the leadership.
Yeah, right. Yeah. All right. There's two items. Let's move on to item 7, Regional Sector Shared Services Council Controlled Organisation Statement of Proposal for Consultation.
Thank you, Chair. So we do have Andrew Siddles and Sarah Bell both present, who have drafted the paper and been involved with leading this work. It was previously presented to the Corporate and Strategic Committee meeting. The proposal here is to commence consultation as required under the Local Government Act for the participation in a council-controlled organisation. I don't think the paper requires any further explanation. It is laid out in terms of what the proposal is in the consultation document. Happy to take any questions.
I've got a question. I see that the key dates of consultation are opening on the 2nd of May, closing on the 15th of May. 2 from 15 is 13. If you follow the law, which I've tested before in the High Court on 2 occasions, the day in which you give notice is not counted, and the day in which you receive is not counted. So we're down to legally 11 days for consultation. I know this is not a particularly controversial subject, but I do feel it's not good form to have effectively 11 days, including a weekend, for consultation. Could we extend it so that at least there is a fortnight, 2 clear weeks as a minimum?
So I think, to be clear on this, notification would not be intended on the 2nd of May. Notification would happen following today's resolution. So it's that the formal consultation period in which we're receiving submissions begins on Monday and then closes the Friday hence. The Monday hence. So it is the full 14-day period in which we're receiving submissions, but notification sitting broader than that. So certainly not the intention for notification to start on the 2nd of May. Nature of the proposals, 2 weeks as a consultation was judged to be broadly adequate. I think in terms of meeting the timeframes, if verbal submissions are required, that we will run into some difficulties if we extended it, for example, for another week. But if Council's satisfied that notification happens immediately following today's meeting, or as soon as practical over the next few days, then we'll stick with the timeframes. So some guidance on that would be helpful.
Well, I'll provide some. I don't think today's meeting, deciding on a proposal to consult, is, in my view, notification of consultation. I would ask the staff to do their best to ensure that we give at least 14 days clear notification. If we can't do it because of other constraints, then I'll surrender to it. But I think as a basic rule, we should have a clear minimum 14 days for even the most innocuous things we have to consult on. There's nothing challenging in this, I grant you, but I just think having less than 14 days is not good.
Chair, just to be clear, it won't be just the resolution of this council, so it will be advertised in the Hawke's Bay today, will be on the website, will be a media statement. That will commence in the next day or so, and so with consultation closing on the 14th of May, given it's the 27th of April, sorry, the 15th of May, given it's the 27th of April, we will certainly be well clear of the 14-day period.
Well, I look forward to you ensuring that you're well clear of it. I'll watch closely. Any other questions? Councillor Williams.
Thank you. Look, to me, the proposition is a no-brainer. Just on the consultation document, the structure would be that initially, well, the consultation document advises that initially, I'm just thinking about potential cost risks to ratepayers that we should signal perhaps a little more squarely. Yep. It says involvement in CCO won't initially require any additional funding. And I'm aware, of course, it actually generates a whole lot of efficiencies and that sort of thing. But there is the possibility, if you go back a page or two, that the CCO may decide to take on new services that as a shareholder we might have voted against, but nevertheless we're now required to contribute to, that our ratepayers may have to support. Unless I'm wrong about that, would it be worth saying, or just putting in a sentence that, you know, there is at least the possibility that the CCO might take on additional operations or activities that we would need to fund to be paid, to be met by ratepayers, that need to be considered alongside the benefits. That's under the section of benefits of joining. There is no section saying risks of joining. I'm just wondering if our consultation document is complete.
So there may be a little bit of ambiguity that's led to possibly misunderstanding about the nature of those services and their impact upon us. What currently occurs with respect to RSHL and what we would expect for any new services is that they would be on a fee for service or a subscription basis.
Oh, I see.
Which is to say that we wouldn't take on any obligations that RSHL makes a call on that we have opposed. They would take on some new services and offer those to whichever participating councils wish to take up that service.
Oh, I see. Okay, so we can opt into or opt out of those services despite.
Yep.
Okay.
We absolutely can, and other councils have done so to date.
Well, would it be worth explaining that in a sentence or two in the middle of benefits?
Look, I'm sure we could come up with some wording to that effect. Certainly, any new services that are taken on, would be therefore subject to decision making at this table through the annual plan or long-term plan process if we were to join those services over and above the ones that are already provided.
from a ratepayer perspective, my only concern would be with this, that I'm suddenly going to get lumped with a cost for a CCO that we bought into. That
Sure.
We've got no control over. So if that could be clarified, thank you.
Word optional is the key thing there. Councillor Foss?
The finance team seem to be quiet on any recommendations here, and it's purely for financial reasons. So why is that? Presumably it's, as you say, it's apparently a no-brainer.
Look, I guess it's because it's a vehicle for delivering services as opposed to a proposal to deliver any additional new particular service. So there is no fiscal impact at this point in time of us joining the CCO. It continues to deliver the services we're currently purchasing from the entity, and at such time as there is a proposal to take on a new service provided by the entity, we would expect there would be financial analysis on that provided to council.
Sure, but we're taking an equity holding in something here, which should be quite handy just to have the finance people say, and we don't perceive any issues or risk from that, just because that's their area of expertise. And that's really the guts of the proposal.
Could I just add to that?
Hello.
Just to add to the conversation, the finance team are involved in this process, so their names aren't on the authoring of the paper, but the next step in terms of clarifying the structure of the organisation, the finance team, I'm working closely with them on that. So they are involved.
Yeah, thank you. And Chair, we just had, I don't know, at least 18 months ago, we had a conversation that anything like this, the finance team would have some comment on, that's all. And so it's just missing. So I know it's kind of a minor one, but they should be there.
Chair, can I suggest that when the decision paper comes forward following the consultation, that we ensure that there is appropriate commentary from the finance team?
Thank you. Any other questions? Will someone move that the recommendations 1, 2, 3 and 4? Councillor Foley, Councillor Williams. Like to speak, Councillor Foley? No. Councillor Williams?
Yes, no, just to say this is to me almost a no-brainer. I'd just suggest adding the words after additional costs program under benefits, which is we could just say something like that would be a decision for each council to take with any additional funding contribution to then be approved following consultation by the participating councils under their long-term and annual plans. Right? Something like that.
Okay.
Come back to me if you need that. We'll put it down.
Any other comments?
One comment, please.
Yes.
And I know that I've harped on it to you about this before, but I think if you're consulting the community, I would like to see a little bit more plain language used.
Noted.
Thank you.
Hallelujah. Okay, I'll put the question. All those in favour will say aye.
Aye.
Contrary, no. Carried.
Crayons.
Appointment and remuneration of directors policy for adoption. We're back here again. So, do you want to do any discussion on this, Chief Executive, James?
So look, following the last discussion, a draft of the policy was considered by Councillor Williams, and his feedback on that has been appended. And the previous discussion has been reflected in the revised drafts. Mr. Skirman is here as the author of the paper if there are any questions directly to him. And I guess just an assurance to Councillor Taylor that the issues that she was concerned about were represented at the last meeting.
Okay, any questions?
I've got a couple.
Back.
How many HBRIC limited subsidiaries are there? Current. One.
2.
Two.
Food East and
Food East
East
and the Port.
In the port, okay.
And we hope to have more.
Have more. Okay. Who appoints directors to the subsidiaries?
That'll be the decision of HBRIC in consultation with HBRC.
So that means the existing sitting councillors on HBRIC will be part of the decision making?
I think once you've done this policy, at some point, you'll have to go and redo the directorship of HBRIC. Te Mato Investments.
Okay. Are there any subsidiaries in the pipeline?
This one.
Nothing in the formative stages yet, but people are looking at different options, but
Okay, so this paper directs to excluding current sitting councillors to be on subsidiaries, correct?
with two exceptions, the Councillor Foss and Councillor Barker are both on subsidiaries, and when their terms or things have expired, it would then apply to all subsequent appointments.
Managed exit. So would that then also not apply to so future appointments? Should that also not apply to councillors? It's a bit like, and I'll explain why I'm asking the question, is often ex-ministers retire to beautiful jobs as ambassadors of the country of their choice.
There's only one of those at present, and there's plenty of ex-ministers. But I would have thought that the point of the policy is to have independent commercial directors appointed on the basis of merit, so that the selection panel would go through and look at the best for the job of independent directors. So they would come as an independent commercial directors for a commercial entity. What they have done previously in their past will be part, no doubt, form of the assessment of the panel, but they would have to be independent commercial directors and the best for the job.
Will you allow me an additional question, Mr. Chair?
Sorry?
Will you allow me an additional question, Mr.
Olivia,
Chair?
two.
Two. I may think of two. So as an ex-councillor, would you call that person independent?
If they are an ex-councillor, meaning ex, I would think they would have to be deemed to be independent, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
There's
Any other
nothing so ex as an ex-councillor.
And Councillor Curtin's observed the
you've proven
truth
that
of it.
wrong.
An ex-councillor is certainly ex.
I have something.
Yes, oh, sorry, Jacqueline, you had a question.
Wasn't sure if you'd finished. Because I missed that last discussion, I just want to clarify that when directors are being appointed for the CCOs, an independent director of HBRIC is the person who appoints them. Is that correct?
No, it's not me.
No, it's the committee.
So
So the process is, as it's written, is due to be that the appointment process would be conducted by HBRIC or Tomato Investments. They would then, having made their choices, make reference to HBRC for an informal engagement. At that point, having heard the advice of HBRC, they would then go and confirm their appointment.
right, so everyone in HBRIC is involved in appointing those directors,
With one
unless
unless
it's a councillor.
That's right. Unless it's a council.
Right.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted to clarify.
Yeah, that's right. And I think the process of having a consultation works incredibly well. It's a New Zealand style that take, for example, the appointment of judges is done on the basis of consultation. So the Attorney General consults with the judiciary, consults with this, consults with that, and then consults with Cabinet. And when all of that consultation has been done, and the light of the advice, the Attorney General makes the appointment. So it's a uniquely Kiwi way of doing things, and I think it works really well. Yeah, anyway.
Thanks, Chair. Just for reference, what are the small changes that were made between the workshop to the paper?
They're in there.
Want me to speak to that?
Yes, I've been
Please.
solicited.
Okay, if you go to item 8 on the agenda attachments,
Attachments.
they're all in markup, and I'm very grateful to Tom and to Leanne, who I think was involved as well. And I'd raised a number of issues and suggested some changes. The first is, so they're all in markup. If you want to find out what they are, they're all the track changes.
Yep.
Oh, the blues.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
And I just to add to had been through them all, they are clarifications and additions which everybody supports.
Trying to make it work.
Make it work. It was really good. Yeah, helpful.
I could say that there is one substantive change in there where the word support diversity in the appointments has been changed to the word promote.
Promotes.
So that was more active, actually doing something about it as opposed to, hey, that's a nice idea. There you go.
Yep. I thought, but having said that, I thought your word was actually what we meant.
Yes, I thought so too. Thank you.
Councillor Curtin.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. I want to go to paragraph 30 on page 4 of the marked up version. And I just want to, I've got a clarification as to the inclusion of HBRC executive directors appointments, limiting that to two terms of 3 years each, and if they're lucky, another further term. Is that rather presumptive of future council decision-making around appointments? I'm just visualising my next 6 terms, you see, Mr. Chair.
Well, I thought you hadn't got to the midpoint of your career on this council. Actually, I thought you're still on the first stanza, Councillor Curtin. So
no, I'm just. My point is it presumptive of future decision making of councils?
Well, if I could answer you, this is that I would see this as a document that's our best draft first time here, and I would have thought future councils may choose to come back and look at this in the light of experience to amend it and as they see fit. So I would expect iterations of this. I wouldn't expect this to remain unmolested by the future.
So be it, Mr. Chair.
Chair, perhaps if I could add that I think it's good practice to signal to directors being appointed that there is an expectation and a presumption that if they do perform as expected, that there will be 2 terms required of them, which gives the entity continuity of governance. So I do think that that's helpful to signal. It does say will normally be appointed, so there is some wriggle room there for exceptions based on what might be the operational requirement of the entity for a short-term appointment. But I think as a default, 2 terms as the minimum, and then 1 further term as a maximum takes you to 9 years. And I think again signalling to the community that we see some degree of refresh and balancing continuity with the need for governance to remain fresh within these subsidiaries is also a helpful signal. And of course the policy can always be suspended by resolution of council in exceptional circumstances. And I think we've seen with the Port of Napier the view by directors typically that 9 years is a sufficient period to make a contribution, and after 9 years going to 12 starts getting a bit on the long side of things.
Yeah, I appreciate it's parallel with good practice. My only hesitancy is that we have councillors on a range of committees, etc., and we don't restrain them. For example, we want to see Councillor Williams on transport for the next 6 terms, I would say.
But then again, with councillors, you have the public three-yearly review. Councillor Voss.
Thanks, Chair. Just make a few comments, but I'll flag up front. Again, I'll be abstaining on the vote of this. I've abstained on this all the way through. That's what you do when there is a potential perceived conflict of interest. I'm very, very disappointed in this. I actually think it's 17 pages of policy paralysis. Probably could have done with 2 or 3 pages. Mr. Chair, I did ask to be engaged or involved at a recent meeting and around this. I haven't been asked to be involved in it or engaged in it, so that's disappointing. I'm also disappointed that I haven't been able to persuade my colleagues around the table, who I do respect, of some of my concerns. It does, this policy as written, it treats some directors on some organisations differently than others. That doesn't seem right, doesn't seem equitable, but the influence of the council seems to be diluted because of that, and that's the key concern that I have. It assumes They have different skills and values, yet they all sign up to the same codes of conduct, and under commercial organisations are governed by the same laws. It assumes management of conflicts of interests are different for different organisations. I totally disagree with that. And even in the principles of this paper here, it confuses directives with actual principles. It just seems under that lens to be confused. I am very concerned that it places a huge concentration of power and influence on the chair of HBRIC. If you think it through, and that what other directors are and are not allowed to participate in, and those remaining councillors who are part of the yet to be formed committee who decide and evaluate the performance of those same directors. There's no reference anywhere to evaluation and performance criteria, which is worrying because the only measure of success of the HBRIC, for example, and the port is actually financial. So, Mr. Chair, and even earlier comments from the Chair, or yourself, whoever, talking about the need for independent commercial directors on our various entities. I'm very, very disappointed that they seem to be all mutually exclusive. It is quite possible to have commercially competent councillors around that same table, around various tables. So, Mr. Chair, I've made these points earlier. I do acknowledge that it's come a fair way, the paper. I was took great offence to the first version of this. Still got a wee way to go, but as I say, I haven't been able to convince enough of you of that. So therefore, I just leave it. I'll rest it there, but please note my abstaining from the vote on this.
Thank you. Right. I think we're ready for a resolution. I'll be happily move the recommendation. I have a seconder.
Second, Chair.
Councillor Curtin. Councillor Curtin, I've said enough on this, so I won't take a first call. If anybody else want to speak on this?
Well, I just want to reflect to Councillor Foss that one of the deliberate steps we took in response to the concerns you shared, and out of respect to you, was to have an express ability to depart from the policy that primarily CCOs of HBRIC would be independents, and to have the express discretion for councillors to be appointed where they can bring benefits to the table. So I hope that's obviously not allayed your concerns, that it has gone at least some small way towards addressing them, and I just wanted to make that.
Thank you. I appreciate that, and I acknowledge that.
All right, before I put the motion, I'll close the debate by saying I just want to endorse what Councillor Williams said, that there has been acknowledgement of that. And secondly, in directed to you, Councillor Foss, about being a solitary voice. You'll probably recall earlier today I was a solitary voice also. So it happens from time to time. You just have to say, well, I'm on my own here. That's it.
And you buy the beer later. I understand.
That's exactly right. So
No idea what you're talking about.
I put the question all for support for the recommendations 1, 2 and 3. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Contrary, no.
No.
No. Against, and 1 abstention. Motion's carried. Right. Let's move on to the next item, consultation about coastal hazards. Who's leading this, Chief Executive?
It's going to fall to Chris.
Chris?
Yeah.
Not yours.
So it's up to me. I think Desi's on leave. So look, this is just a paper to outline the consultation process for the Hawke's Bay Regional Council to take charge of adaptation to coastal hazards. So there's a couple of key activities now that all councils have agreed, and that's for us to advise the Minister of Local Government and run our consultation process. It's important to note that the scope of consultation is just on the assets to be transferred in terms of the financials, and there's further consultation to occur in the future on the actual strategy, the costs and rating for that strategy. And then there's some key dates there, and Council will be having a workshop on the 4th of May to have a look at the consultation document for comments. So reasonably self-explanatory paper. I'll leave it there and happy to take any questions.
Question in 14.4, 2 community meetings in person. Could you describe for me what you envisage with the 2 community meetings? Why only 2? Should we have more? And would you expect the chair of the Coastal Hazards Committee to lead that? Is it going to be led by staff? Just describe them for me. I'd like to hear this. Thank you.
Yes. So we as a tag group, we were challenged with dialing in the right level of engagement with the public, and a lot of the challenges around. We feel a lot of the interest will be in the actual strategy and actual solutions for different cells, and that's what we're not consulting on at the moment. We are consulting on the regional council. So we have a wide range of measures there, and we felt that 2 community sessions were appropriate, and they'd be run by staff, and we would have members of the joint committee along to those particular sessions. So we felt they'd be held in coastal locations. So that's just a high level summary of how we thought that they would be run.
Right, any other questions? Councillor Curtin.
Councillor Foster.
No, you go.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I want to be clear on when we go to consultation as to the statement that it's only those identified assets in the transition document and what that means, because we do need to be absolutely transparent with everyone that other projects, and I think it's at 6C or D, can't remember, in the transition document, talks about those going to consent. So are we going out to the public and consulting with them on the basis that only those projects scheduled in the transition agreement are on the table, or is there an underlying expectation that those other projects, as they come along, will be added to the pile? Can we have clarity on that, please?
Yes, so I think we've been clear up to date. We do have a 2-stage consultation process. This first part is the consultation on the Hawke's Bay Regional Council taking a leadership position in adaptation to coastal hazards, with a further consultation on the exact strategy, so that the actual projects for each cell, their timings and their specific costs and their specific rating models. So we still have that second component to come, and that will be clear in the information and the nature of this engagement. I think James has got some comments to add.
So, look, I think Councillor Curtin's question was particularly in relation to existing assets and then transition under the Memorandum of Transition and any other projects that might be under development in the ensuing period. Chris, tell me if I've got this wrong, but the only one I think that we're aware of that falls into that category is the H18 project. And communication from the Chief Executive of the Hastings District Council late last week to me indicated that the District Council intends that asset does not transition to HBRC, and that asset will be owned by the H18 properties themselves, and HDC will effectively act as their banker to finance it. But the ownership and responsibility for the maintenance, etc., of that asset will reside with them. So that's part of the consultation conversation they are having with that community. So that asset is not one that we're expecting to be on the table for transition, and I'm not sure if there are any others in the consenting pipeline that might therefore fall foul of whether we're being clear with the community, which is that the only assets transitioning at this point are those that are listed in the schedule.
If I could just add to that, this matter came up at the last meeting, and I challenged the Hastings District Council representatives about the process of consultation, and they said that they were in the process of consultation with the community, but I said what we need is a much more robust process of consultation and advice. And before they start any process of consultation with their own community, they need to talk to us, the HBRC, about it well in advance, and talk to us about how we might manage it. And so there should be a formal document come to us. So there can be no surprises at any part of the journey of this. Otherwise, it's going to cause a problem. So the quality of communication, the quality of consultation has to rise substantially from the very informal place it's been before, to mitigate against any of the concerns that people might have about what they're doing.
Can I follow up, Mr. Chair, if you allow me? We've got the Asher report, which talks about the regional council taking on all of the coastal protection assets. Do you find it also extraordinary that we would have some assets in the coastal environment not being administered by the regional council? Is there a problem with that, please?
So I would say there's nothing prevents a private structure from being consented and constructed under the current model. And there will exist some assets that currently aren't in the MOT that do exist. And an example of that is a structure that is part of the Hastings outfall for their wastewater treatment plant. So that is a key part of the wastewater treatment plant, not really a community adaptation asset. And for that reason, it was felt it best remained with that sole asset that it's part of, being the wastewater treatment plant. I think in the spirit of the decision is that we have a consistent manager of those structures on the coast who understands the interrelationship of the structures in the coastal environment, but nothing will prevent a private structure going in under the current legislation.
With respect, Chris, quibbling over an outfall structure versus, in this case, H18, is quite a different thing. We're talking coastal protection versus a piece of infrastructure for a specific purpose. A follow-up question, if you allow me again, Mr. Chair, would be West Shore revetment. That's on the table, on the cards. I would find it extraordinary if under this proposal we were also not, that would be also excluded from any future coastal protection oversight.
So are you referring to the Whakariri Ave revetment? Yeah, so that was initially in the MOT under the first draft. When the Napier City Council didn't award the contract, it was removed because there was a level of uncertainty around whether it would be constructed, and it still remains uncertain as to whether it would be constructed. So likewise, there needs to be further dialogue between Napier City Council and ourselves, as per the MOT, on the future of that project.
And should it be decided to be included, would it be introduced into the assets that we would administer? Is it likely?
Well, that would, under the current arrangement, that would require a separate resolution of council to accept that into the MOT.
Correct.
So that's the safeguard for any assets in the intervening period. They're not automatically in. They require a separate decision of council.
Councillor Foss.
Thanks. Just on the communication and engagement, picking up on someone made the point earlier, how will you know that's successful? How will you know you actually are reaching the targeted audiences, such as your coastal? And I appreciate this doesn't include Waimarama, at least at this stage. But for example, leaflet drops and things like that, many are absentee, some are only residents often, even around the coast and the campground at Tiawonga, etc. So given our interest in communication and engagement capability, how can we reconcile that with this very important issue needed to have penetration to those, so there are no surprises when someone went to go to the next level, next round?
So one's certainly a lag indicator, which is the number of submissions that we receive. but by then it's obviously too late. But that is a measure of success in terms of the communication effort. The other part is we have done some pre-engagement, and those responses have been used to build this engagement process. And we actually want a wide range of engagement. So we want people from all areas of the region to comment on this proposal, not just because we know that the areas at risk from erosion and coastal inundation will naturally be interested, but we are more also interested in a wide range of views.
Can I just make the point, Chair, that traditionally our measures of success here have been sending messages out as opposed to receiving them or digesting them. There's no feedback loop. They may have gone really well or maybe thrown out with a junk mail. Got no idea. And I'm not giving you whatever the answer is, but it's just such an important issue and a relatively targeted market, actually, that maybe it could command a new approach or some other approach, because our track record on consultation or submissions received from those that normally don't engage with the council is very, very, very low.
Could I answer that, if I may, is that you're probably well aware that there are quite strong community organisations in, for example, Tiawonga, around this issue. And that this entity has been engaged with them as a community organisations, and then overlaying that there has been other surveys been undertaken. So the council actually has a good feel for the community structures underlying. So we're not aiming this as simply sort of sending out messages. We're going to go back and connect directly with those community organisations and those other groups that we've been with before. And if at some point we feel that we haven't got this right, we can then make some adaptation. But it seems that there are currently feedback loops on this to make sure that we're getting as good a penetration we see.
Yeah,
I would also observe that this is as best consultation I've seen with this organisation on any subject before. I think we've in some ways we've overbuilt this.
Maybe, and it's because it's so defined. It's hopefully, so if we can have those feedback loops along the way, so we can potentially double down on communications or whatever. Other than when we got 27 submissions or something.
Do that. Any other questions? Someone like to move? Councillor Van Beek.
Move.
Who would like to second? Councillor Williams. Councillor, would you like to speak?
Yeah, we as a council always have difficulty with actually penetrating our community and actually probing and finding out what is in their mind on these kind of issues. And I think our communications team has put a good plan forward to actually try and achieve that. But in this day and age of almost surveys after surveys after surveys, there's at least 2 or 3 I get through my phone line every week, and so they are a bit overburdened. But we hope that by trying something new, that we're able to actually get the outcome that we desire. So hence I support the plan that the communications team has put together with the staff.
Thank you. Councillor Williams.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Simply to note that it will need to be made very clear in the consultation document what we're not consulting on, and what's got me, into a very binary, straightforward position on this is paragraph 11, that we're not consulting on the Clifton to Tongoya strategy, the cost to implement the strategy, or how rates will be allocated to it. It's simply the taking on of the activity.
Yep.
A measure of success might be that there are no submissions at all.
You're quite right. Councillor Curtin.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and my comments will be obvious to everyone, particularly to my colleague, Councillor Van Beek. I just don't accept the commentary that this consultation does not carry with it an implication that we are going to proceed to adopt the strategy. That just doesn't make any sense at all, nor does it make any sense at all that we, in one breath, gleefully grab hold of the Asher report, which says that this council should be doing it on its own, and then I look at the words from Asher which say The HBRC is best placed to take charge of all, and emphasis I've added all, aspects of adapting coastal hazards in the coastal area. That means all, not part, not all, not different aspects of it. It means all, and the strategy really only makes sense when you do that. And any other weasel words to the contrary are simply not credible. Interesting as well that we are confining, in some respects, the consultation to the coastal environment. I think the people that should be consulted actually live in Central Hawke's Bay or Wairoa, because they're going to have to pay. They'll be the ones paying. And, well, you can shake your head, but at the moment, Mr. Chair, that's the implication, is that we spread the load far and wide away from the coast and into areas that that so far have very little interest in supporting such a structure. The other aspect, Mr. Chair, and I won't go on too long, is to say we end up with this particular strategy ultimately delivered will take priority, will be ring-fenced, will be contained within our long-term plan, and that priority will be for coastal hazards protection. When it comes for us to debate whether in fact we do coastal hazards protection and line that up against protecting the good folk of Waipawa from flooding or Wairoa, they will take second place. Their project will be superseded by the coastal protections that we sign up to by way of this the strategy when it is finally adopted. I don't think there's any way around suggesting that the consultation is to take on the task without adopting the strategy. That makes no sense at all. It becomes a fait accompli at that point. So I just keep repeating it. That's the consequences of this action. Without, I'd be quite happy with it if we were upfront and positive with the public around what we're doing, but I just don't believe that this achieves that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other speakers? I'll choose to speak. I just want to say I don't think there's any value in taking this consultation to Central Hawke's Bay and Wairoa at all, as has been suggested previously. The fact that there's been no implication anywhere that I've come across that implies or suggests in the slightest that the cost of coastal hazards in the Napier and Hastings area will ever be attributed to Central Hawke's Bay or Wairoa. Not one suggestion until about 5 minutes ago. What has been clearly stated, for the record, is that where the current costs for these assets is falling, for example, within Hastings, however, Hastings has divided up, but there will be a rate which will have some general rate in it, and there'll be some for people in a particular area, and whatever the balance is, that'll simply be uplifted from Hastings and shifted across to the Regional Council, who will continue to levy the same rate, the only difference being the rate will go out on a different letterhead and will be attributed to that asset. Similar for Napier. Let's be clear about that. In terms of any future builds of assets, it will be subject to a public consultation. And the clear statement in all of the papers that have been thus far is that the charges will be levied against those for whom there is a direct benefit. There will be in some areas a public interest, but the public interest area of it will be within that particular council area. So we have been very clear to make it known to Wairoa and Central Hawke's Bay that this has no implications for them whatsoever. We've consulted with Wairoa and Central Hawke's Bay to ensure that they understand that, and they do. But what has been also consulted to Central Hawke's Bay and Wairoa, that if they wish to join the strategy because they see the benefit to them, that they can. But there is no implication for rates in Wairoa or Central Hawke's Bay from this. Okay, like to closing submissions?
Yes, I'll do. I speak 4 languages, none of them very well. But the word all, in my assumption, doesn't mean all as some think it is. All housewives use XYZ washing metal for their washing machine. We, of course, know that not all housewives have washing machines. And blokes,
An example.
as an example.
Keep digging to get us in trouble here.
So on that basis, we're actually not here to actually approve and accept Rain or Ash's report, okay? You read whatever you like into that. I still believe when I look at reports about Tonkin and Taylor, when they talk about the cost of actually not doing anything, it's impossible for people on the coast to accept that level for us not to protect them and as an entity to do something to actually help them out. So on that basis, and we've been here before, you've had your speech now for the last 4 times, and no doubt there will be a 5th time, but hey, that's a good thing, because I understand that at some stage people just go back to their iPhones and their iPads and when the speeches start and actually do more important things. So I think there's actually a very good resolution, and hopefully we'll all be in favour of it. Thank you.
I've got to do the dishes.
You, more often, that's what I say.
I don't think you do.
All right.
But anyway.
The recommendation is Regional Council receives and notes the Section 16 consultation and take charge of adapting to the Coastal Hazards Staff Report. All those in favour will say aye. Aye. Contrary, no.
No.
Carried. Right. We now move on to report number 11, report from Māori Committee. Michelle, you're going to report to this?
Kia ora koutou. So, as the only representative here today from the Māori Committee, that was chaired by Mike Paku last time, but taken as read. And I can't go past without first acknowledging the significant election result last night of, and I know you're going to bring it up, but as the representative of the Tai Whenua today, I'd like to acknowledge the election results, most especially the chairperson. It has changed after 25 years from Ngā Hiwi Tamona to Baden Barber. And tēnā te mihi i te rangatira Ngā Hiwi for your service to our people. Yeah, it's going to get a bit sad now. I can remember Ngā Hiwi coming to Wairoa, and he brought the board to Kaungunu Marae in Nuhaka, and I just happened to be told about the hui, and I went along. And he asked the board, he asked our people, what is the main issue? What do you feel the main issue is for our people at the moment? And this was 5, 6 years ago. And we said the tile, the why, our environment, we're concerned. And that's when he drove the kaupapa about kahutia and recloaking the papatuanuku. He also did a lot of mahi like the wai claim for our iwi. I was present when he brought Ngāi Tahu through, and we've been going through the Wai Māori case with them for our waters. And for that, Ngā Hiwi, if you hear this, thank you so much for all you have done. And congratulations to Baden. It's got certainly got big shoes to fill. So, and also I'd like to acknowledge the re-election of our kaumātua Hame, that there was a bit of a competition there between him and Jerry Hapaku. So,
really?
Yes. And I think he was really elated about his result there last night. So it was on Facebook, it was announced there. And also just to relay, the Wairoa board position was Nigel Howell. He's back on the seat there again, and so Baden's board will be Nigel Howell for Wairoa. Whanganui Rotu Hori Reti, Here Taunga Thompson Hokianga, Tamatea JB Smith and Tamaki Nuiarua Hayden Happy. So congratulations to them all. And that's in addition to our report. And the only thing I have to add is just point 5, just missed their Peri Katarina Kawan advice. She was not able to commit to the PCA review working party, I think it is. And so we supported Peter Eden to take her place as replacement on that because of Peter's background in pest control and vector control. And also point 8, just the wording, asking that there's a lot of work, I understand there's a lot of work being done at Mahia and Nuhaka, but Whakaki, Aroha mai, Whakaki, for the northern catchments, but there is a lot of other work that the Regional Council are doing in that area, and I was noting that the same, it was almost like a generic template, was coming up in that report there from the northern catchments. So, and especially now that we've had the issues in Ruakaturi, Tauranga. So, kia ora, that's if anybody's got any questions.
Thank you. Questions? Straightforward.
Ka pai.
All right. I'll move the Māori Committee report be received. Have a seconder. Jacqueline. All those in favour will say aye.
Aye.
Contrary, no. Carried. Very useful meeting. Council's reports from outside bodies. Would you like to report from an outside body?
Just an
out-of-body experience. Has anybody got one of those to report? Okay, let's move on to discussion of minor items. We've got 2. Gisborne Railway Line. Martin Williams, the Chair of the Transport Committee. You've got news, I take it.
Yeah, thank you. Look, yesterday I attended the second project group meeting for the resurrection of the Gisborne Railway Line. This council generously agreed to contribute $30,000 of economic development funding to the preparation of a series of reports that are going to Cabinet within the next week or 2. There's already been an interim paper that's gone, which I am happy to share with everyone. And I just really wanted to give a bit of an update on where we got to yesterday. There's been a detailed assessment by Fraser Geologics on what's required in engineering terms to reinstate the railway line, with all of the dropouts that have occurred in the more recent extension to one of the dropouts in November 2021, and updating some of the likely project costs. We've got updated sort of social and economic benefits assessments of climate change benefits, reduced road maintenance, reduced road crashes, that sort of thing, and an updated freight study, all supporting the paper, which is essentially a request to Cabinet for $5 million to do a full business case for the reinstatement project. So it's a step, another step towards that. So the money that we've contributed has generated the reports, which will go to Cabinet to get the funding for the full business case. The project is now looking at about a $60 to $70 million project in light of the most recent washouts, but that includes a tunnel option to build greater resilience. Can I just give you a couple of key statistics here? The updated freight study is envisaging around 140,000 tonnes of freight per annum, mainly containers, horticulture, that sort of thing. That's 4,000 containers per year, and that includes, it's conservatively based with absolutely no inclusion of some quite significant expansions into horticulture and kiwi fruit, including from our PSGEs in the Tairāwhiti Rohi, who are fully on board and very, very supportive, with Nikki Sarank, who's been a key member of the project group in that regard. The modelling says that there would be sufficient freight in that regard for a 5-day-a-week freight train service, and that's again without that additional investment on 24 wagons a train. Now, if you think about, and that equates to around about $1 million a year savings in CO2 emissions at $70 a tonne, along with reduced road user charges, crash statistics, etc. Just think about this for, and also benefits for number 6 wharf, additional freight out of our number 6 wharf. The Wairoa to Napier railway line is now a 5-train-a-week service, displacing 10,000 trucks per annum logging trucks off that road. Now, I did some maths that if you had 10,000 trucks leaving Wairoa every 2 minutes, it would take them 18 days to exit the town. So if you stood there at the boundary of Wairoa and a truck went past you every 2 minutes, 10,000 trucks would take 18 days to go past. So this is a big change in the burden that road is carrying. In the maintenance contributions, just think of the CO2 emission benefits, think of the reduced congestion. I just wanted to give you a flavour of some of the benefits that could flow from this project, assuming we can persuade Cabinet that this is something worth investing in for the range of reasons we're espousing. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a very good report. One part you missed, that if Waka Kotahi has its way, travel by train will be a day quicker than by road to Gisborne.
Trains at 80k?
Never happened.
Councillor Ormsby.
Oh,
We'll
sure,
talk about
Chair.
the Ngāti Kahungunu Iwi Incorporated.
Yes, thank you. And just mihi too, Michelle, for the pānui. And just tautoko what you're saying, to thank Ngā Hiwi for his service the last 25 years. But ko huri te tai, we have someone fresh step into this space, Baden Barber, who won by, I think, 486 votes. The turnout was around 20% of Ngāti Kahungunu eligible voters. And we also had 2 tauta here positions filled, and that was Eroera Beatty and Brian Ruawai Hamilton, and then our Wairarapa seat was Melissa Ihaka. So I think it's a good mix-up of some of our returning board members as well as new members, but it's an exciting time for Ngāti Kahungunu in terms of building stronger relationships across the board within the rohe. Kia ora, Chair.
Would you want us to write, the council to write a letter of congratulations to Baden and a letter of
I
appreciation?
think it would be great of you, Chair.
Good, right, well, Secretary will take note of that for the minutes, and we'll
Yeah,
do
and
that.
with our co-chairs, that would be fantastic.
Fantastic, yeah, I think it'd be a great idea. We should acknowledge Nahiwi's contribution to the region formally, and we should welcome Baden. Thank you, great suggestion. Okay, now you've all failed the test because you've forgotten to point out to me I went past item 10.
I was actually quite happy for you to go.
I thought you
otherwise we
finally
have
ripped it all up.
Another 5-minute speech from the other side of the table.
Let's go back. Item 10 all this time. Sorry.
Because you talk about washing
I just had a
machines.
question to Councillor
where were you?
Williams, if I may, with regards to his comments on the
These
rail.
non-debatable items.
No, that's right. I just wanted an indicator if that's right.
Yeah.
It'd probably have to come from staff. Just with regards to the reports that he referred to in building up the profile of those changes around the rail, is there any indicator that the Wairoa Airport is a part of that conversation around change in scope of activity, or is that outside of the regional transport gambit?
It's not something that I have any cognizance of. I have not seen any reference to Wairoa or, for that matter, Napier Airport in this discussion. So,
Right. Thank you.
here's the facts.
Okay. So we have a summary report. It's pretty straightforward. I presume you've all read it very well, very conversant with it. The chair will be able to recite it to you for memory if you wish.
I could do it. I think if you have time to read it, the thresholds, triggers and signals is quite an amazing piece of work, how that works and how that actually will play out in the strategy itself. So it's something we've been waiting for a long time, and hopefully in due time we'll enact upon. Thank you.
Would you like to move the report be received?
I'll remove the report to be received.
Okay. Councillor Ormsby will second it. Anybody like to speak? I'll put the question. All those in favour say aye. Contrary, no. Carried.
Thank you.
Okay, we're now down to the end of the day, and we're coming to the public excluded. So would some member like to move, some council move, Councillor Foley move that we go into public excluded for the minutes?
Taking it.
Councillor Van Beek. All those in favour say aye. Contrary,
Aye.
no. Carried.